I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
Here we go, guys. We are live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody, welcome. Here we are at the Gamekeeper Studio, the Mossy Oak Gamekeeper Podcast. I'm looking at Dudley. He looks mighty rested. Lanny's excited. We're glad to have you back, Lanny.
Sorry, I missed the last couple. Yeah. Which I've done a real good job without me.
Well, I don't know. We missed you,
Deer
for sure.
season's coming up, so you might get to miss me again.
Well, yeah.
We almost added a sound thing that was your laugh.
Like you talked about this, like the laugh in the sitcoms.
Yeah, the canned laugh.
Yeah, the canned laugh.
We do have a lot of laughter from you.
Yes.
And we got the boss sitting at the end of the table.
Oh.
Yeah, have you got all your plots in, Toxin?
Heck. This is the most frustrating year of. I say that at least we have so much low country land, and it's been so frustrating for almost some places I got into and repaired roads and got access to a week or so ago that I hadn't been in on 3 years, maybe 2.5, 3 years. It's been that wet, but it's like all or nothing. I will say I sent y'all a text or pictures. I'm seeing more poults than I ever have and hearing about more poults than I ever have. And I hear Adams, pronounce his number for the state, and it's like tied with a record amount. So, I mean,
that's good.
All in all, one of the things we stress out about a lot has gone back in the right direction this year. I know it's a geographic thing.
I'm seeing a lot on my camera.
Yep. So,
sunshine.
I sent you a video. Did you see the video on the back of a four-wheeler?
Oh, yeah.
And you pan over, and there's a field full of poults.
We're doing the Kiki run.
Oh, yeah. They didn't know I was in the world.
I love that sound.
That was fun.
Yeah. Well, so we've also got today, we've got Dr. Bronson Strickland and Dr. Steve Demarais.
The A-team.
Yeah, from Mississippi State, the Deer Lab. And we've got a lot to talk about today with deer and the changes that are happening right now, going from summer to fall and then eventually fall to winter. So we do have a lot that we want to talk about. So, but before we do that, Lanny, what are you, blood on the biologic, you seeing or hearing anything?
Well, the Mississippi velvet season was going on. Our own Tom Robertson killed a stud. He did. He really did. Down in Wahalik. I don't know if I want to give specific locations.
No,
but if you know where Wahalik is.
That.
Yeah.
Is that a
Kemper County?
The metropolis.
That's an Indian name. What does that mean?
Noxubee Kemper line.
I don't know what Wahalik means. You been trying to see?
Does anybody know the story? Toxic,
no.
do you know?
I think he knew the deer was there. He had seen him.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So he put the slip on him. Looks like.
They did. A beautiful deer. Big full velvet.
Yeah, congrats to him.
He's quiet. He's good.
And then there's this. They killed. Several big deer were killed. I know a guy in Madison County killed a 150-inch 8-point. His name was Benjamin Bell and got on bottomland. So.
Well, look, you guys sitting here. What are y'all hearing about the velvet season? It sounds like it was like a really neat idea to me, and it sounds like a lot of people had success.
Yeah. First of all, 150-inch 8-pointer.
Yeah, it's
huge.
That's
a really
155.
Yep.
Yeah.
The twos on the left side of this thing are.
I'm gonna bet you this one of Tom's was scaring that.
Yeah, it was. Oh, he looked definitely real heavy deer.
I interrupted you, Steve. Go ahead.
I haven't heard the final numbers, but there was a requirement to report your harvest for this season, and it's in the hundreds of animals.
Wow.
So,
and I'm sure there's some that weren't reported. They forgot because it's hard to get in the habit anyway. But that's good.
So, is it a slam dunk for they'll do it again? Or?
Oh yeah,
I think so. Yeah, and it's one of these things that it's not necessarily biologically required that we do it, but it's allowing an extra opportunity for landowners and hunters to get that velvet buck harvested and on the wall because they really look cool.
Well, part of what we want to talk about these changes, that one of the questions that I plan to ask is, it seems like we see a deer in velvet, and then when he comes out of velvet, you might see him another couple of times, and then he's gone. He moved somewhere. So that I want to come back to that, but Dudley, you had a friend that killed a big deer during this velvet season. You were talking about it the other day.
I was.
It seemed like you were. Or maybe you have
maybe
one.
I was.
He's talking about the size of his chestnut trees up here.
Yeah, well, anyway. Well, look, guys.
That's right.
No, Dad,
I
you
do
missed your
have a
chance.
friend.
You missed your chance.
You don't have any
Dr. Moselle got a nice one with his longbow.
Oh, during velvet season?
Yeah, one of my dad's turkey hunting buddies.
Okay.
With a longbow.
With a longbow.
That would be
Velvet buck.
That would be Mr. David.
Dr. David
I know
Moselle.
of
We
him.
call him Dr. Mo.
That's tough. The longbow, I don't think it's got the range that some of
No,
this
that's
other
serious.
archer equipment has.
No doubt about it. You got to be into it to be shooting a longbow.
That reminds me of our old Spence Bongine used to
Yeah.
run Lee Haven, and he was
He was on.
It's a great story. He loved to plink with his, and so there was a guy that had been making a living off of cleaning the deer off of that lease the year before, years before. So he was used to like hanging out there, and he would charge so much for skinning people's deer. So he came up there and was really worried about the new tenants because we were shooting bows. And so it's really funny because Spence was out there in the yard plinking targets with the longbow, and I guess he thought that's the way we were going to hunt, And he watched him, and he said, "Mr. Spence, do you mind telling me how many deers you actually eat behind that bow?" And he was like so worried about his skinning business going down. And of course, Spence was throwing arrows everywhere with that longbow, just having fun with it. But I still remember that. How many deer do you actually eat behind that bow?
Not many.
Wow. Yeah. So, guys, look, I'm looking at Toxie. So, if you see Jim Cantori show up in your neighborhood, it's
that's not
probably
a good sign.
bad.
No, that's not a good sign
Yeah,
ever.
so we want to
think about those guys in
the
Florida.
people in Florida, and I think now
Oh,
it's
my
going
gosh.
to Georgia and South Carolina. Our hearts are with you there.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so bad in Florida.
So, Bronson, a storm like this, though, over time, it would. How does it affect the habitat for deer and turkeys?
It would be, of course. Oh gosh,
It depends, right?
gotta
Yeah.
say
Of course.
it right out front there. It's going to depend on how severe it is. So yeah, if it's severe in terms of looking like a tornado, and it's disrupting the tree canopy and all that, then
Like Katrina did.
yeah, exactly.
That was a rough one.
Or Ivan, too. Ivan.
Mm-hmm. Ivan was bad
Bad,
for a
too.
long ways
Yeah,
inland.
sure was.
But there's going to be a great response. On down the road, years down the road, you're going to get a lot of cover and a lot of good food that normally you wouldn't have. So kind of maybe look at the bright spot next year and the year after. It's going to create a lot of habitat.
Yeah. It's got to be rough on those animals, though. And when you see this on television, how bad the weather is, it's amazing.
They hunker down.
But they're resilient.
Yeah.
I've got a buddy that's got some land on the other side of Panama City where that hurricane went through, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And
The one that went through Mexico City,
Yes,
Fort
yes.
St. Joe.
Yeah.
I want to say, is there a Calhoun County around there? But the deer pictures he's been sending me, it's amazing. You wouldn't believe it was Florida.
Yeah.
The response, all the food, just used to be a bunch of closed canopy
Right.
Sunlight's
junk.
hitting
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key,
man.
Dudley. You take a closed canopy and you open it up, however you open it with disturbance. You're going to get light on the ground and more food.
Right.
But, down south of Tampa where this thing hit, I don't know personally, I don't know that there's closed canopy trees there or what the.
Well, not a high percentage of it.
It'll be
There's
interesting.
a lot
to
of
see.
orange groves and stuff like that, probably. But yeah, definitely. What it does do, it gives them sanctuaries because if you can't get in and harvest and salvage some of the timber, it's such a mangled mess. You can't even really. I've done it where a tornado's come through twice and take my dozer and just try to open the road back up. And it's so hard to do because stuff snaps off 6-8 feet off the ground. You can't even get a dozer blade up to that. Maybe with a track hoe you could grab some of that, but if they're big trees, you can't move them. So it really creates almost a big sanctuary for them if they can access the cover behind something like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a two-pronged effect here. You almost have to take our word for it that it's going to be good because you're not going to be able to see the deer. They're going to have more cover. They're going to have more food, so you're not going to see the deer. And you're going to wonder, well, this was a bad effect. But it really is good because the more food they have, the less they see you.
Absolutely. One, my main, I said it at a deal 35 years ago. I was sitting there with Bob Dixon at a store promotion thing. They were asking people about, whitetail questions and whatever. What's your philosophy things? And I said, I've always kind of gone by, if he ain't there, you can't kill him. And they were like, what? I was like, it seems like if he's not there, you're going to have a hard time killing him. What do you mean by that? I said, well, it seems like we got to let them grow up and get more age on them. And, they looked at me like, what are you talking about? I thought you were going to give us your rattling technique or how you pattern whitetails. Well, I mean, that's kind of the whole gamekeeper thing anyway. That's what he's saying. I mean,
that's right.
If he's not there, you don't.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to hunt.
Yes, it is.
So let's just jump in here with the first question right out of the gate. And I'm looking at both of y'all. Bronson, I'm going to go to you first. But right now we're just transitioning from a summer pattern here in Mississippi and most of the South to the where our deer are just now starting to shed. I'm seeing, last night I saw a deer that had velvet, and I've also saw deer that were just fresh out of hard, and they were hard horns. So let's talk about that transition, if you will.
Well, we've got two changes that are going on. We got the landscape is changing, and the deer, and in this case, a buck's physiology is changing. So some of the photos we get all the time are not just antler photos, but we get the what's wrong with my deer photo. And think of all the pelage or the changes in the hair coat photos we get.
The nighttime photos, they look like something's really wrong with the partial summer coat, winter coat coming in. It's like, I've done that before, and like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with them?
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah. And it's usually, does my deer have mange?
Yes. Or got to partially, depending on the picture and the sheen on those night images, oh my gosh, it's a piebald deer.
Right. So they're doing that. They're changing their coat. They're getting ready for colder weather. Of course, testosterone levels are up. The velvet is shedding and coming off, and so they are going to be a viable breeder here in the next few weeks. And this process with antler shedding, it happens pretty quick. Like one of our bucks in the deer pens, it was within about 3 days. He went from it just beginning on the tips of the tines to being completely shed. And Steve has evidence over the years of seeing particular bucks over time and how reliable it is. And the one that I'm referring to, our graduate student Luke said it was about a week earlier last year, and the year before it was a few days. But the bottom line, over 3 to 4 years, within 1 week's time, he's reliable shedding at that time, his velvet.
They tend to be more reliable in terms of their timing of shedding of velvet than does tend to have similar breeding dates, but there's a lot more going on nutritionally and stress and physiologically with the does that could impact exactly when she's going to ovulate and be bred. But the bucks, they're just hanging out during the summertime, growing antlers in their bachelor groups and swatting some flies.
Oh my goodness, the flies have been bad this year. So do y'all see that the bucks eat that velvet once they scrape it off? It's laying there on the ground.
Well, they'll eat it off of each other.
Wow.
You still usually have bachelor groups still together when they're shedding, and they're just eating it off because it's a great source of protein, and that helps strip it off.
Is it skin? Is it hair? What is it?
Yes.
Yes, there we go. That's right.
It's
hairy skin.
Exactly.
And tastes like chicken. Had to say it.
Yeah.
Deer are always looking for the nutrients that are easily available. And so like in this case, but it's really astounding when you see a doe after she's had a fawn and then eat her after birth.
Oh, yeah.
As well. And you're thinking about this herbivore. An herbivore is not going to do that. And she'll grab that mass of flesh and gobble
Down
it up.
it
Do you
goes.
think part of that's a instinctive thing over time?
Yeah,
and
I would say
evolution
it's both.
to protect, leave a more
Leave
sense.
trace. Leave no trace. Never
Because
thought
I think
about
dogs
that.
do that too.
Yeah.
All biologists, all deer biologists, and probably I'm going to bet all 4 of you have eaten acorns before.
Oh, yeah.
I have never eaten antler velvet. I've
No.
never tried it. Never had the urge to do it.
Although there's a big market for it.
Yeah, there's like
a product,
sprays and
Steve.
stuff.
That's
there
right.
are.
You might,
Yeah.
well,
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute. Wait. Hey, that could be a
We can
sponsor.
make that happen.
So
Dudley's got some.
isn't that biologically one of the things about velvet antler is a medicinal thing that's the fastest growing tissue in the animal kingdom?
Yeah,
or whatever?
the Asian cultures use
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of dried velvet. They actually harvest growing antlers and use red deer and harvest it about a third of the way out.
Well,
And
the New Zealand people, we when we started, the whole premise behind the biologic in the seed was the New Zealand seed that were bred for 20 years specifically for the way deer digest, as opposed to, the leftover cattle forages we had here. But they said that, part of what they bred for was antler production, because I want to say
at that time
40% of the revenue from the deer came from the velvet antler.
$100 a pound.
Yeah. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's right. About 40% of it, I think they said. Yeah. I don't know what it is now, but
it's still
all they could produce, they could sell. And they'd harvest them at a certain time and cut them off the whole antler.
It's a great natural resource because it's harvestable every year.
Yeah.
As opposed to, some of the Asian medicines involve like bear bile and gallbladders, and you get a one-time shot.
Shark fin.
Somebody has to make a commitment to that one.
Yeah, that's the whole.
So that was one they were especially mindful of the phosphorus and calcium needed to rebuild that every year. And I remember them talking about and we talk about it here as a good analogy for people. It's like if you had to cut your leg off at the knees or maybe even higher and grow it back every year, how much extra you'd have to have.
Yeah.
To do that. And so why that's so important in antler production. And so that's why these seeds are so popular, I believe.
That growing antler is chocked full of hormones that are geared towards promoting the cellular replication and the growth of the antler. It's a larger antlers are growing an inch a week.
Wow.
That's huge, rapid growth. And so the hormones in there, there's a growth hormone. You've probably heard of growth hormone for humans.
HGH.
Yeah, human growth hormone. Well, there's growth hormones, several of them, and they're really concentrated in the velvet antlers. And so there's a real physiological basis for it being of benefit in some way. Now, I'm not saying go out and buy velvet antler material from Asian sources, but they're bound to be packed full of
something's in there.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Bobby gets his on eBay.
Yeah, he does. He's just spraying it under his tongue.
That's why he looks so good.
It's the beard. That's where the beard came from.
Yeah, that's right. So we're talking about these changes in the animals this time of year. What's going on in the woods?
Well, we've got a change in seasons, first of all, but think of what we would call the growing season or the warm season. That's coming to an end. And so you can look, Dudley, like driving over here, I'm seeing all the goldenrod and the plume grass, and all these colors are so beautiful. But the quality of those plants is now at a seasonal low.
Oof.
So they were really palatable and nutritious back in the springtime in May and June, but they're in really poor shape now.
Right now.
And so now we have cool season plants are starting to grow and develop, and so it's just going to be a shift in diet, and typically diet quality for deer. And one thing is we just don't get the same amount of forage biomass production in the cool season than you do in the warm season.
Why food plots done right are so important.
And acorns.
So
Acorns.
what would you say would be the worst month in the South as far as, the shift from warm to cool?
I'll give
and
my
then
2
and then
cents.
again in the North.
North would be tricky for me. I might have to go to someone with more northern heritage for that. I would say in the South, though, my vote would be September, October.
That's what I was right now.
Would be the worst. Yeah, most challenging time.
Yeah.
Especially we're in kind of a drought now.
Right.
It's gonna make it worse.
Yep. And getting food plots off the ground, and we're just not fully into the cool or cold season yet. Mass production has not really ramped up yet, so we got a deficit there for a good month.
BCP.
Yeah. Well, so looking at the North, wouldn't that be like in February and March?
Yeah, the winter is the Grim Reaper in the north, and it's a
Okay.
very distinct time. Now, they're going to have the seasonal decline in plant quality in the summer as well, but, in the world of living in the north, your deer they don't really think about it, but they're programmed to worry more about the winter than they are in the summertime.
Well, they also can get the double whammy of it not only being not much food, but it could be covered up with 2 foot of snow or something too.
Yeah, and the cost for thermoregulation, maintain their body temperature.
While they've evolved to be bigger bodied, I'm sure.
And I guess their season changes over more quickly from summer to winter, basically.
Yeah, although, boy, my temperature sure got cool about 2 days ago, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yes.
It felt good.
You can see the difference. I mean, from being out a lot this year, the the changes in just the last couple of days, really 4 or 5 days, and even the activity and going through places that have big mature timbers, beautiful. But I rarely see anything in the summer, and it's just like deer and hogs and stuff running, turkeys everywhere. They've already started to migrate to, it looks like, Dudley, earlier small acorn drop for whatever reason. I don't know why that would be, but there's more water willow, small acorns draining down. And
aborts and things, probably from, insects. And
could be, but it wasn't aborts because they were eating them, and I cracked a couple of Dudley style, and they had meat in them. So for some reason they're falling a little earlier. But it's amazing how quickly, I guess the older animals already know what to do that time of year, and then as soon as they find the first ones, it's like they'll shift locations.
That's what I've been seeing too on the Spartan's been lighting it up.
We've talked about it here, but that deer that Jordan killed, it probably migrated 2 miles from summer
we had pictures of 2.5 miles away, didn't we? Yeah. I picked the wrong stand that morning. It just always happens to me.
Picked it wrong by 2 miles.
Yeah.
And they'll really shift for the right acorn because that keeps on feeding them for a while. It's not like one little hit and it's over,
Yeah.
So this time of year, usually our food plots are up now. They might have a good green 5 o'clock shadow across them or a couple of inches of growth here at the first part of October. That this year we're a little behind, but we always see deer key in on, especially cereal grains, just as soon as they come up. And is it because of this deficit, or is there something super attractive about the plants at that time of year, or both?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both.
Did I answer my own question there?
You kind of did, but I'll add a little bit to it. So, first of all, they're attracted to it because it is growing. It is actively growing, which means the digestibility of it is going to be a lot greater. The nutrition, like crude protein, mineral content, is greater in that growing tissue. And then, like we were saying a second ago, it's just that time of year, the availability. So it's a really good plant. It's a really good time of year for the nutrition of it, and then what's available on the landscape as well. And that's precisely what we've seen in our studies is cereal grains earlier in the year are very, very attractive.
But as they mature now, things change, don't they?
Things will change, but that's, again, we've covered many times. That's why with a mixture within your food plot and staggering that with quick growing plants, slower developing plants, those other plants catch up and they go through that growth process a little bit later. And so attraction will vary with that.
Yeah. We've always, through the years, I can remember people would be so proud when their food plot was just kind of eaten to the ground. And we've always said, no, that's not what you want at all.
Right.
And that's kind of, it's so important that we kind of look at that food plot as maybe use the word like storing groceries for the future. I mean, if you can feed that deer all the way through the winter, then you've accomplished something.
And I think it's also a change in philosophy. And what I'm about to say, someone would say, it's not wrong to do this or think about it, but I think you're missing an opportunity. Is a food plot attracts deer, and we hunt deer. And so as long as we're attracting deer during the deer season, but we're also don't miss the opportunity for the nutrition side of it. And then Bobby, circling back to what you say, if it's browsed down to the ground, you may still be attracting some deer, but you're not providing the nutrition that you want to that time of year, which is important right now and getting through winter. And then it's also important when spring rolls around for them being in good condition to take advantage of the growth that's going to come in the spring and summer. So, add more acreage or make sure your soil is amended, make sure the plot grows well, and kill some deer.
Yep. Yeah, that's another thing too. But I will add to that, though, even if they do the double negative, if they do eat it to the ground, you might look like a glaze of green, but you're not going to attract as many deer. I spent a lot of times, I've had cameras, a lot of people have taken hunting, and your attractiveness to get a mature deer in a food plot during daylight drops dramatically when a food plot's eaten all the way down to the ground, because he wants to go get a belly full and not have to, lip high, get just a few little morsels and stuff. So you just don't, it isn't attractive enough. On top of what you're talking about, one of the best times for a mature deer is very, very late rut, and they're, that's probably the first time in a week or two they hadn't been right with a doe. They can't find one, so they're frantically moving, and they're starving for what they put themselves through. If you have really good quality, food right there. Oh, wow. It's incredible.
You're making a really good case to go ahead and shoot your does early.
Oh, for sure.
And I don't think
Why
everybody.
Why would you not?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but I know it can be a lot of work, and a lot of guys want to put it off, and
Right.
So I don't know that there is a right answer, but it sure. Jedley, what are your thoughts there?
Just do it when you can. It seems like more often than not, we end up playing catch up.
Always. And I wait till the very
All
end.
y'all need to do is carry
There's no
Hayden with you.
question.
You won't have to worry about it.
Some of the people I know that have been very successful will actually have opening day, opening weekend, as soon as they can, doe hunts. Go ahead and just invite a ton of people that you can trust and just hammer them. And they feel like, it makes your rut better. It makes the winter food better. It's healthier for the herd. But also it's better for your deer hunting not to nip at them all the time. And those same people, and it's just been a couple, they were very successful at it. They prohibited people shooting does in the food plots in the afternoons and swore up and down that made a big difference, that you weren't just, just think of, they don't take much to avoid,
Right.
What's going on. So the least little thing you can do helps a ton. So I hate the thought of just chaos on my place for a couple of days. Get it over with probably is really healthy early on.
So you guys are both nodding your head. Have y'all got anything to add to that to help a guy understand the best way to manage for the
Steve, why don't you tell them about the 3-day effect from your study in Oklahoma?
Oh, sure. Hunting effects on deer behavior. We did a study in Oklahoma, and after 3 days of intensive hunting, opening weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the deer significantly altered their behavior just after that 3-day opening weekend. So it doesn't take them long to learn. So I agree 100% with what Toxie's talking about here, is get it done early and get all your animals removed as soon as possible, and then let things calm down so that when it comes to rut, some people say, well, I want all my does on the food plots on the property during the rut, so bring in the bucks. Well, yeah, but then you'll never get those does harvested.
Well, not only that, you're going to see more bucks if you have a lower number of does, because they're going to have to. To me, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, it's not chance of seeing a good deer in the rut isn't about how many does. It's about how much he actually has to travel to find them. And, the more they travel, the more chance you have of seeing them. And I've always noticed much more dramatic ruts, much more activity early, deer moving a lot more when we harvested our does down. Way better.
And it's also a good time to get rid of some of your lower quality, age-specific based males, too. Get them off.
Sure.
If you're in a culling program, you're knowledgeable hunters, you know what they're looking at, get some of those, because it's all about population control. That's what you're doing. And then you've got the hunting for the trophy animals during the rut, the older, mature males.
It makes a lot of sense.
You're not culling the bucks for genetic improvement.
No, we're not.
You're culling for food.
The same reason.
We are.
Same reason shoot a doe.
But I mean, hey, if you have the choice and you got a 4-year-old with cow horn spikes still on it and a 2-year-old 10-point out front of it,
Don't shoot the 2-year-old 10.
That's right.
But Dudley, you want to tell about this deer over here behind you?
Oh, the 2-year-old 10 on the wall.
My 3-year-old 12-point. Yeah.
He's been crying about that since the day he killed it.
So Dudley killed a Boone and Crockett just a couple years too early.
A couple years too early.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Bronson. You deal with a lot of landowners across the state. Are guys using these? I mean, what do y'all know about these suppressors on a rifle, like a you're shooting subsonic? Is it quiet enough that it helps take the pressure off a property there?
I've had a lot of conversations, but I don't have any data. And the conversations are always very, very positive, at least in their perceptions of how the deer react to shots and so forth. But, I mean, you're still going to disturb the deer.
Question about it.
You still got to go to the plot and drag it out and all that.
I think
I
that
feel like
causes more disturbance than that.
Nothing disturbs deer more than human scent.
That's exactly right.
Human sighting is even behind that.
Right. Human scent.
So, I mean, but that's way more disturbing than the sound of a shot going off.
Mm-hmm.
So I think more of it would be maybe the deer in the food plot didn't get quite as spooked by that. But you still, if they're still there, you got to walk out there and deal with the deer, you know? I mean.
So here's the way I think about it, like that, Toxie, is we've all been on a food plot before and shot a doe. And typically it's a larger plot. But you shoot the deer, it goes down, and there's 4 or 5, how many other deer that focus their attention, they look over there and go right back to feeding. Mm-hmm. That to me demonstrates that it's not just that immediate loud sound that may sound like thunder to a deer, but then you follow it up with the human disturbance of it's still daylight and you get out of the stand and go over there. I think it's the people being on the plot that's worse.
No question. And
I agree.
And it's even in a bow stand hunting acorns, or if you're, whatever now, you can hunt over a feeder. If you're hunting over food in an afternoon, it's almost impossible to hunt without spooking. I mean, if there's a mature buck using that food, he's not far away. You might not see him. You may think he's not far away right at dark, even if he's not there. And I think it's almost impossible for you to get out of there without sounding an alarm. And I always used to say, and this isn't data driven, but I think it's like half again harder every time you bump a deer. So if you had a 100% chance of seeing him, it goes to 50, it goes to 25, it goes to almost 0 if you bump him much more than that. Mm-hmm. And that's the delicate thing about hunting at a food source, a food plot, or where acorns are falling, or a feeder, or whatever it is. You got to be so careful about how you do that.
Yeah. Well, we talk about it all the time. It's food, water cover, and pressure. I mean, that's the fourth.
But they might be passing by to go to water. If you got a travel stand where where there's some, pinch points or a funnel or forced travel or just deer migrate, the problem in our area is that sometimes the bedding and the feeding are so mixed up, there's not a defined one. But if you find one of those places, they're like gold. Don't tell your buddies about it. Keep it quiet. You can hunt travel corridors so much more than you can hunting at a food source. Yet, we all want to hunt a food source, including me. I catch myself doing it.
It's an easy thing to do.
Yeah, and it's usually a waste, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you're right.
Early on, it opens Saturday. Early on, yeah, but then you've kind of burned your chances there for a while when you spook them.
Yeah, we had you can shoot does in that first weekend, and it's going to vary from state to state. But our bigger food plots, we would shoot does early on, and then it would be no does until after the rut. But we would shoot does in the woods and on the perimeters of things, and try not to disturb the place as much.
Oh, I also
remember it seemed to work.
Some people that were successful. Not calling names, they had one was like it was a point system, and you had to get 100 points before you could shoot a buck. And boy, that changed things. Like a coyote was bobcat, and does were like, I forgot how many points there were to add it all up. Another person I know lets people he's got several bucks to let other people shoot. He's got a pretty big place, and he's like, until you kill your limit of does, you cannot shoot a buck. And that'll get your does killed fast.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, there's even a couple of WMAs that have that rule.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they call it the earner buck.
The earner buck.
It's amazing how much more efficient people get at shooting their does when you hang the buck out in front of them.
It'll incentivize you real quick.
Or like I said, you could just take Hayden with you and he'll mow them all down.
Hayden he's more than willing, isn't he?
Man, he's at that age. I can remember when mine were that age.
They like to stack them up.
Yep.
So, Dudley, you're thumping the pay.
I'm getting antsy to getting back to talking about what happens in the progression of
yeah. Well, let's
right now. Yeah.
Warm season to cool.
So, with that said, have you got a specific question you want to ask?
No. Yes. What
What
is the typical thing that deer hone in on once the warm season stuff fades in most parts of the country?
I'm gonna have to do the Jerry Clower saying again, Steve, like we did the other day. This answer is so simple. I'm gonna let my chauffeur here, Steve Demarais, answer it.
Well, you've got a lot of moving parts there, Dudley. You've got the changing biology of the animal in complement with the changing biology of the plants and the senescence of the warm season plants and the early growth of the cool season plants. And you've got increased movement after the velvet shedding is completed. They're starting to spread out across the landscape. So there's a lot of moving parts. It's hard to say this is going to fix that problem. You can't really fix that problem. It's deer behavior and the physiology of the plants. But what we have just to is understand that there is a problem at this point, and there's going to be a transition, and your early mast crop trees and your fruit trees can be a great value in attracting animals during this time period. If if you don't have the good food plot growth coming on, and the value we were talking earlier about a mix on a food plot. The value there too is the quality of the plant. Plants are changing throughout the season. You also have the opportunity that the deer can then select the particular plant, even if it might not be the most valuable nutritionally, it might be providing something to their needs. And the animals have a lot of nutritional wisdom, and that's why we push so much diversify your habitat. And if you give them enough variety, they're going to find whatever they need by themselves. We can't always just pour it out of a bag. We try to grow it with food plots, but if we complement that with a well-managed natural habitat, then they're gonna meet whatever they need. They're gonna find it.
I heard Toxie mention it one time, and it's a good layman's terms way of saying it. Is deers and other animals, their brain is more connected to their stomach than with humans.
Yep.
Except during that couple weeks leading up to and after the rut.
Or humans get like that too sometimes in life.
That's that aphrodisiac stuff coming out.
That's right.
Dudley, I was joking that's about the simple question. I don't think that's a simple question at
Right.
all. I think it's very, very complex. And another part too, Steve, is going to be the social hierarchy among those bucks and how they've set it up. And what we've seen, during the summertime, you've got this bachelor group of bucks, and then they start breaking up right now or before, and they're kind of going back to these places that they have established. And I don't think they're going back for one specific thing. I think they had history in that area and they lived. So you got to live through it. And there was the good collection of food and cover and breeding opportunities, and then risk in terms of human disturbance. All that is playing a role from year to year for those bucks when they're going back to particular places.
It's interesting how, with these collared studies, how close they are to the same day.
Right.
Going different places every year.
It's fascinating.
Back
and
and
some
forth.
of them go a lot further. Some don't go far at all, and some will go 18 miles and swim a river twice a year to do it.
Yeah, that buck that we collared 2 years ago, in March, he swam to Louisiana. In August, he swam back. The next March, he swam back to Louisiana, spent the summers, August. Within a week, swam back again, and then his collar died. So we don't know about the third year. But
I bet he went back.
Luckily, he came back to Mississippi before his collar died. So we completed the cycle twice, and we had another buck that did a similar shift in roughly the same time frame. August and February was his movement dates, and you think, well, is he looking for some food or something, or is he afraid? A joke that that they want to get out of Mississippi or they want to get out of Louisiana because of relative hunting effectiveness, but it's hard to pin it down to a specific thing because that buck that moved 13 miles and he had great habitat where he was, and he went to another property that had great habitat. So he didn't change what he was getting by shifting he just did it because he needed to. And I think there's a lot of benefit in a deer population to have some risk takers. Just like humans, there's a lot of people that aren't risk takers and they succeed and they do their thing, but then there's some risk takers that really do well. And there's some risk takers that fall and don't do so well at all. But having that risk as a percentage of the population is valuable in a deer population, and that's why we have these deer that do strange stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And as a public service announcement, would you guys and would you suspect that other universities that are doing research, y'all don't want somebody to shoot a deer with a collar if they encounter him, do you?
Good question. Generally, no. But we have kind of put the hit word out for our collared deer here in Mississippi this year. We've got some up in North Mississippi and Benton County, and some down in the lower delta around Issaquah County. The collars are dying this fall, and they should fall off, but not all the time. Sometimes collar malfunctions. So we would like to get those collars back. We also ask that, especially these deer that have been like swimming the Mississippi River and making these big movements. We had a doe that moved 26 miles this past year.
Wow.
Man.
26
Can you
miles.
determine why at all? Food?
No, I mean, the example I just gave about the buck doing 13 miles, the habitats were the same well managed habitat. So this doe moved in the lower delta. They're possibly timed into flooding.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's flooding factor there, but these deer, like the one that swam in the Mississippi River, he wasn't afraid of water.
No.
He swam a mile across a really deep, fast-moving river. So it wasn't just water, but there are patterns of environmental change that, again, these risk takers can take advantage of, and water is probably a factor in that lower Mississippi River.
Yeah,
Valley.
I think so.
Nature has a way of, you think about how, deer were here, and then we didn't have any deer, and then they were in this area and this, and the population spread. So there's probably something instinctive in the species to have a certain percentage of, risk takers, travelers, because that spreads the population.
That's how you colonize and find new areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You used to say every tree is a snowflake, but every deer is an individual as well.
I find it very fascinating and frustrating as well that you can watch a deer all summer long, and then round about this time of year, he's going to be gone.
That's right.
And then
Where
once
did he go?
And when the rut's over,
Same way with turkeys, too.
He might come back.
Turkeys are the same way. I feel like, and I'd always been told that there's just only so many like mature, active gobbling turkeys that can coexist regardless of what they've got to eat or the number of hens or anything. And I feel like that's a little bit of the same way with deer too, because they get that by the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, by the time this rolls around not much longer into the year, they've been living together all summer or longer, and they know what the pecking order is. So maybe there's a challenge at the top or somebody new comes in, but the ones that are not the king of the mountain are going to get the heck out of there and find them a place where they're not getting their tail whipped all the time, So they spread out. Who knows what determines, but I'm sure the king of the mountain decides what the pick of the spots are, but they spread out.
Yeah.
Lanny, have you got a question for these guys?
Well, I really wanted to ask them what the velvet was, but they already answered that.
Yeah, they did. So let's think about this now. So it won't be much longer. We'll be going through another transition from the fall into the winter. And I wanted y'all to talk a little bit, and Toxie and Dudley, y'all have all got some input here as to just how important acorns are to the overall landscape in the late fall and winter.
It depends on where you are. In some areas of the country, Appalachian Mountains, Central Texas, acorns determine the fawn crop and this overwinter survival. And they're hugely important. And particularly in those areas that I just mentioned, you don't have a really good forage base the rest of the year. So if it's a good acorn crop, they're going to go into winter well, and they'll produce babies well that winter, and then the males will be in good condition in the spring if there's spring rain to eat adequate food to grow good antlers. So it's a huge driver in some areas. Here, acorns are important because the deer love them and they're going to go to them. But here, we have a more stable year-round browse and forb community than some other places. So in terms of where they're most important, it's like places like the Appalachians and Central Texas, critically important. Here, they're great, kind of like dessert in your meal. I mean,
Ice cream.
Yeah, it's the ice cream that the deer love, and they're going to benefit from it. They're going to fatten up wonderfully. But they're not going to be starving it through the late winter here, because the late winter that's up north doesn't exist here.
Right.
Yeah, we want it to be icing on the cake. And so like Steve was saying, years ago when we studied those populations and learning about it in school, I mean, there was actually a name for it called a mass-dependent or acorn-dependent deer population, meaning that's the single most important variable in body weight, antler size, spawn production, survival, everything. It was dependent on an acorn crop and how good it was. But around here, it is a wonderful opportunity when we have it to supplement all the other forages provided. And deer are going to be in good condition.
So
when
it's
we have
safe
a
to
good
say
mass
that,
crop.
a good mass crop could, it'd be the determining factor on, the difference in quality of the deer herd from year to year.
I wouldn't say so much here.
But with a great mass crop, then could you expect to have a healthier deer herd?
Yes, yeah. I would say so. I would say you're going to see it in body weights, and specifically when you're skinning the deer, you're going to see it in
the
fat.
fat.
Absolutely.
But on the flip side, as much as I love, oak trees is like my favorite thing in the world, but there's areas in the country that grow huge and healthy deer that have never seen an oak tree.
Had it.
Yeah, I don't think it has a lot to do with like antler production at all.
No.
Maybe they're
Just
a little bit better shape coming out of winter might help some, but acres aren't chock full of whatever phosphorus, calcium, and the things to put on antlers that you need. So
nor do they fall at that time of year.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like rock. It's candy to them,
Yeah,
and they love it.
And Bobby, back to your questions about the seasonality and the changes. What they need is all a function of what they're doing physiologically in their bodies and their nutritional demands. And so acorns are great for bucks going into the rut. They can help fatten up, and they won't lose as much as they might in another year if they didn't have as good an acorn crop. But what's important to the buck is that post-rut recovery time period after he drops his antlers. Think of that dropped spot on their pedicle where it's basically an open wound. And if they don't have good nutrition, you're not going to be able to recover from that injury. It's essentially an injury. It's bleeding, two bleeding wounds on top of their heads. And that's when they need that post-rut recovery nutrition. I'm not trying to push food plot blends, but back to the blends.
Yeah.
That's why it's important
We
to
love
have
food plot blends.
Yes.
that's why it's important to have a blend that includes that late winter, early spring, really good quality forage in it.
Yeah, we often talk about that's the most neglected time of year.
Oh, no question about it.
Everybody just quits hunting and
Well,
walks
they don't
away.
want to plant something. Let's just say you have something. Most likely, if it's going to survive almost anywhere in the United States, even in a lightly, a dense herd, it's probably not real palatable or great tasting or whatever early in the season. So people have tried something. Oh, deer don't eat it. I'm not planting that anymore. Well, that's probably what you need, because likely that is going to be the only thing, and feed them in really late season when they need it. And not only if the season's still open right at the tail end, if you have it, your hunting's going to be so much better. But I just think it gets overlooked for that reason. Oh, I've tried that, deer don't eat it. Wow, I'm like, in the density of our herd in some place, I'm like, great news, they didn't eat it,
And, another good reason to do soil tests.
Yes.
And get the pH right. I've learned this the hard way myself. That critical time when they do need that new growth in the late winter and early spring, if you don't get your soil right, that stuff's going to yellow up before it even really gets cold. So if you're not going to do it right, don't do it.
Yeah, and I've probably offended more hunters in my professional career than Bronson has, because he's a lot nicer guy than I am. But the average hunter that thinks all about what they can see on their food plot in November and December is missing the boat.
Yep.
It's all about what is available for the does during late gestation, being pregnant, and then those first 2 or 3 months after they give birth. That's critical to the health of the deer herd and the condition of the food supply when the bucks drop their antlers. Is what you provide them during that November, December, when the bucks, they're not eating as much anyway. They're going to lose weight. Even in a research facility with full ration high quality food available, they're going to lose 25% of their body weight.
Wow.
You can't fix that problem. Don't worry about fixing that problem. Worry about August, September, October, and late January, February before green up. That's the areas that you need to work on.
I sound like a broken record, Bobby, but as he talks about that, it just again and again, I'm
Clover.
yeah. It fixes all those problems.
Yeah.
And now that's not, I'm saying that's all you need to do, but ideally that's the first thing you need to do, because I looked at it even now, and I keep saying this, some of us going into the third year. So that's what, almost 36 straight months, every single day they can get up and get something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like the one at the cabin, that's like 20 acres. And right now with this drought and the acorns barely started falling and there's really no food plot stuff, you wouldn't believe the deer that are living off of that right now. It's so good for them to be able to, as a baseline at least, to have that to eat every day.
So I'm fixing to blow y'all's mind here with this. I mean, y'all all know Bobby Watkins. Mm-hmm. Got a green thumb, can grow stuff like. He came by here a couple of days ago. Dudley witnessed this. He told me the clover plots that he planted that we gave him for the biologic challenge 20 years ago are still alive and producing to this day.
That's
Good
awesome.
grief.
20
That's better
years.
than Kenny.
Yeah.
20 years.
He has tended to them, but I will say this.
He's tended to them, yes.
Some of this, like the old white Dutch clovers that people used to, we still, and that's probably 50 or 60 years ago, that was planted for cattle forages. Like it's all over Shimola, and it grows back every single year. So it's in the white clover species to be able to do some of that. Just are they drought? Do they make it through the severe droughts? I don't personally see how he's done it without a little aid of water. Now, I know he's brilliant at keeping the soil chemistry right and fertilizing and liming.
Yeah, I asked him, he's going to come in a few weeks and tell us some of his clover secrets. You guys might want to come in here and listen as well. He's really good.
He's as good as I know.
I want to circle back, though, when we go back to acorns. Lanny his eyes twinkle when we say acorns.
Man, I mean, it's
mine
just,
too.
I always started.
Your eyes twinkle about every one of these subjects, actually. So, but guys, I'm just, Toxie brings up clover. And then I'm circling back to this mass crop because it just seems like it is so important to the whole landscape. Now I'm thinking about turkeys. Let's not forget squirrels. We all love squirrel hunting, but I'm just kind of it just makes me pause at just how important that is. Because if there's a year when we don't have any, what happens?
Well, and then you got the hog problem on top of it too, because it seems like those guys are coming to the bottom and wiping out everything.
They are wiping them out.
What do they eat? Post rut. Same thing with turkeys. How do they have something to get them through the spring? So,
I would think what a landowner could do to manage for years where you don't have a good massed crop is to manage the rest of your habitat to have native food sources, the early successional type stuff, all the good weeds and things. In addition to that, I mean, if you're putting all your money in on oak trees, one, you're missing out on cover. But
and Dudley, you might want to spend some time on. And variety is hugely important too. There's two predominant. Was the black and the white oak, and how
the reds,
the reds and the whites. So you really do need a mix of those, because I believe you correct. I mean, I'm telling your story here, but the red oaks are more hardy. They can make it through the winter and still be a food source in the spring,
right?
Because of the level of tannins in them.
Yeah, I mean, deer love eating acorns in the fall if they're there, but what about those turkeys in February and early March that are scratching up those little willow and water and cherry bark acres?
Dudley, you and the nursery, they have species that start dropping in August.
Yeah,
and we have some that hang on till almost February.
That's right.
So you can, like everything else, man, that diversity of what you plant can be so critical way down the road.
So at y'all's deer pens where y'all do all this research, if y'all took a 5-gallon bucket of different acorns out, would y'all see a preference to them? And would they, since those deer don't have access to them, do they immediately know what they are and go to them?
They pretty much love any acorn you bring in. Yeah, I haven't done personal studies myself.
But Mariah studied
Jinx.
3 years ago, I believe now. They were all selected. There were some that the deer would go to a little earlier or a little before others, but they ate every one of them. So they're all good. And the way, Bobby, to think about your management for this is we got a good mast year and 2 bad or 2 good in a row, is I keep thinking about Al Brothers and the advice he gave about range management way back when. And it was, of course, he's in South Texas, and you're managing cattle and deer. You got to worry about the drought years. And you might have 2 or 3 years in a row and then a good rain year. And he always says, manage your cows and your deer based on the drought year.
Yep.
So you're managing your numbers where they can live through the drought year, and they flourish in quality on the good years. But you can't automatically raise the number of cows you have on the good year and then have them starve on the drought year. And I think that's why we're always preaching about matching that deer density with your habitat quality, and your wildlife populations become kind of resilient to these annual fluctuations we see.
Isn't that called K, or carrying capacity?
It is.
Okay.
Carrying
I actually remembered something from school.
Did you go to
Good
class?
job,
You did go to class. Hey, what question?
There it is. That's the guy I know and love.
The preference study you were referring to on acorns, was it just acorns, or was there corn involved and everything else? I just didn't
Just
know.
acorns.
Just acorns, just to see what species that they prefer.
That's exactly
And
right.
we assumed the white oak was obviously the one.
Well, they ate them all.
He said they had them all. They didn't really.
Yeah, and think about it.
Tastes better to me.
Some of them, they all vary. The species vary in the amount of tannins. But when it comes to deer eating it, they're already adapted to eating things with tannin.
Right.
And so a little more tannin, a little less tannin, they're not going to worry so much about how bitter it tastes because
Just get it in the gut.
My only, we can't interview deer, but I think part of it is like how hard what's the return on investment here? So they've got to work for like 5 minutes to crunch open a big old heavy bur oak to get a little piece out in the middle, or versus a thin paper shell, swamp chestnut or something. I think part of it, they might be more attracted to,
less work, more
they
nutrition.
can get more to eat.
Or whatever's closer to cover. There's probably a lot of different variables.
They seem, water oaks are not one of the, they're a pretty high tannin acorn. They're bitter.
But I've heard them crunching on them like popcorn.
They eat the whole acorn. In a lot of cases, they just crunch up the whole thing. They love them.
So, guys, y'all are sitting over there at Mississippi State studying all this stuff. And while y'all's watch is going on right now, so to speak, over the wildlife of Mississippi, these wild pigs, they're a plague that's happening. That's got to just Bronson's got to make you pull your hair out.
A long time ago.
Are we in the good old days of deer hunting right now? Are they behind us? Are they in the future? What?
Ooh.
Well, we getting deep up in here.
Everywhere's different. Depends.
Yeah.
It does depend. I'll give my 2 cents, and I'll let Steve give his. It does depend on where you're at in the state, in the southeast, et cetera. But yeah, we have more challenges now, and so we think back in the 80s and 90s, and depending on where you're at in the southeast. But remember, the first sky is falling. That, oh my gosh, everything's over, was coyotes. They're eating all our fawns. And in some places, they're eating a lot of fawns. But we've kind of worked through it. We know how to manage around that, et cetera. And then we add pigs on top of that. In a lot of places, we got a lot of issues with pigs, and it's becoming more and more of a problem. But the big one that scares me the most is now we've got CWD.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so when I think of CWD, that is when I really, the pigs bothered me, and the coyotes not so much, but I didn't really think the good old days were behind us with just pigs and coyotes. But now when you add in CWD in some of these places, in those places, I think the good old days may be behind them.
And I'm going to be a little more philosophical in that there's been problems all through our the last 100 years with deer in particular, and wild turkey too. 75 years ago, there were no deer to hunt. And so, that's a big problem. There's no deer on the landscape. And we got over that, and we fixed it, and we learned, hey, we got a lot of deer now. And, each problem we have to look at it as, well, it's just something we have to learn to deal with. We can fix it as best we can. And then we just have to remember the love of hunting doesn't change just because you have some problems. Yeah, you have to work a little harder, deal with pigs and the CWD world, where you in a CWD management zone, you have to change how you do things. You have to manage your expectations, but you still can love going out and sitting in the woods and hearing the as they're walking through the woods and busting those twigs and leaves and getting all excited and
then it ends up being a squirrel.
Armadillo.
But what we have to do is just remember that love and don't spend so much time thinking about all the problems.
Absolutely. Amen from the choir loft right here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Yes. I hope everybody listened to that, or they play it back and listen to it over again. That was really well said.
I'm going to let that one soak in just a little bit, because it's so, that's very.
Well, it
that's
goes
very
back to the
important.
thing, we only get the moment we're living in right now. Let's make the most out of it, and don't. Daniel said that sense of wonderment. I keep going back to that time. Let's don't lose our childlike sense of wonderment for getting to go out in the woods, and that, like when I was a kid and I did hear that little leaves crunching, everything I heard or saw, a big buck was going to show up any minute. It was so much more fun than I was thinking about all the problems,
Yeah.
Good point.
I want to share an analogy that Kervin Richard from Benton County shared with me a couple of weeks ago, talking about, the problem with the CWD in a high prevalence management zone area where 3 or 4 out of 10 deer you shoot are going to be positive. And I said, how do you deal with that, Kervin? He said, I grow a vegetable garden every year, and I don't get to eat every tomato and every cucumber and every piece of squash that's grown. Some of it rots on the vine, and some of it, gets eaten by other animals and insects and all that. But it doesn't keep me from growing my vegetables every year. I enjoy the process of growing vegetables. And same with hunters. We got to get over this, where it's so inbred to us. Somebody, our fathers, our uncles, our grandfathers, burned into us. You kill it, you eat it. And it's just this religious belief in the hunter. And if you can't eat it because it has CWD and you have to throw it away, it's like, oh my goodness, I can't hunt anymore. I can't deal with this. Well, we got to get over that. That's another one of these.
Yeah, because you're doing more help than anything you could do to take that one out.
Exactly. Exactly. Taking the positive animals off the landscape is helping to manage the disease. And we just have to say, well, okay, I did something positive for disease management, and I'm going to go out there and spend another morning, another afternoon, or maybe all day long and enjoy that hunting experience and get another one. And if that one's not positive, I'm going to enjoy eating it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well said.
Yeah.
On that note, kind of random, do you think they'll ever come up with like a rapid test?
Yes, they're working on it.
Okay.
Now, is it going to be in 5 years or 10 years? I don't know. But people are working on it because it's an identified issue.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and you know what? You guys are dealing with some heavy subjects. But thank goodness that people like you are out there doing this and,
That's right.
and studying it and communicating. What Steve, that's just great words. And we hadn't got to hear you say that as much as we should have, and I'm glad that you explained that, and our listeners will get that, and it will make sense.
It
It'll
hit home
resonate.
with me, that's for sure. I mean, 'cause that's how I define myself.
It's like a lot of problems in life. That CWD thing, that's not that big a problem for me. It's not that big a problem for anybody until
it's a problem.
Until it's in your world, and then it's a big problem. Yep. That's right. So,
have we seen more advancement? I mean, last I've heard is Benton County and some of the northern counties, but
it's spreading.
It's
everywhere.
Spreading.
Yeah, there's no stopping the spread nationwide. Really.
Yeah.
It may slow where it's managed better, but my understanding is really no stopping.
Right.
Per se,
And the best thing you can do is find it early, and the only way you're going to find it early is test, even though you don't think you have
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
You got to test, and then test again. And just because I've talked to people, I tested my first deer last year and it was not negative, so I didn't bother testing anymore the rest of the year.
No.
And then the next year, I got it now. Well, if you tested the year earlier and all your neighbors were testing every deer, you'd find it sooner. And it's another quote, analogy I'm going to use here is William McKinley, who's the deer coordinator for the state of Mississippi. He says, CWD is a lot like cancer. The sooner you find it, the more you can do to manage it. 1 out of 10 deer that you shoot or 2 out of 10 deer that you shoot are positive, you're past the point of being able to do much with it. It's just going to be living with it as it increases in prevalence. But if you can find it when it's 1 out of 100 deer, then you go back and all right, that was a positive doe. And where did I shoot that doe? You go back and you find that family unit and you shoot every one of them, because the greatest chance of finding a positive deer is where another positive deer was.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And so if you find it in a doe, go kill the rest of her family unit, every one of them if you can. And then you maybe do a little bit to help the spread, reduce the spread moving forward.
So get them. I know I said I was going to do it last year and didn't, but I'm testing this year.
It sounds like Hayden would be a big help. If you would.
It sounds like I'm going to have to carry a lot of deer to get tested.
This is a deep subject.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to talk about.
We probably need to devote a whole podcast to see that. But in the short, if guys are in areas, no matter what state you're listening from, if you're in an area that is positive, you need to do whatever the state is asking you to do. Is basically what I'm hearing from you guys. And I think there's some travel restrictions going across state lines. Guys, we need to make sure we adhere to that kind of stuff and do our part to try to help understand this.
Like Toxie said, if you don't have it, you don't want it. No. Once you get it, it's not the end of the world. Just do what your state agency recommends. They're using the best science available. It's not some conspiracy. They don't want it any more than you want it. No. They want it probably less than you want it, because they understand what it's going to do.
Yeah.
So it's not a help your state help you. Listen to them.
And it's free. Getting your deer test, it's not going to cost the hunter anything.
Just drop the That's in Lanny's budget, Toxie.
No doubt about it.
Lanny would like it better if y'all would pay him if there's any way you could do that.
Well, the state will in Mississippi and in other states, they'll pay taxidermists $5 or $10 per sample. So if you're in the taxidermy business, Lanny, you can make some money on that.
I'm in the tenderloin business, that's for sure.
Yeah. This has been so good. I think this was a great point now, since we've been hearing some really interesting things out of Dr. Steve Demarais, that you rapid fire some questions at him. You may not know about this, but since the last time you were here, we've developed this thing we call rapid fire, and it's brought to you by our friends at Springfield Armory. They make some fantastic pistols. You're probably familiar with them. But Dudley has come up with some questions, and he's going to just shoot them to you as quick as he can.
Well, the whole thing about age versus beauty. Don't you want to ask Bronson?
Well,
he's already been through the ringer.
Oh. Yeah. We don't. There's not much else about Bronson we don't know.
We can't even decide who's age and who's beauty. So, Mike, can we do that?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'm ready for you. I got my catcher's mitt here.
And you can choose either one, or you can say neither.
Oh, okay.
Or pass.
A few neithers, not too many.
Well, yeah. Keep the neither.
All right. Are you ready, Dr. Steve?
This isn't like Family Feud. It's not a...
No.
No, we don't have any. Yeah.
All right. You ready?
Shoot.
Deer, typical or non-typical?
My personal preference?
Sure.
Typical.
Dove hunt or duck hunt?
Duck.
Mountains or ocean?
Mountains.
Is it a crop or is it a crawl? You pronounce it like in a turkey.
It's the crop.
Acorn or acorn?
Acorn.
Lightning bugs or fireflies?
Fireflies.
Broccoli or green beans?
Broccoli.
Choose one to go into the woods: snake chaps or permethrin?
Permethrin.
No doubt.
Surf or turf?
Surf.
Napa Valley or Sonoma?
Give me a red wine.
All right, both.
Red.
Whitetail hunt, Iowa or Montana?
Mississippi.
Hey,
Boom.
Killed it.
All right, finally, ice cream or froyo?
Ice cream.
What is froyo?
I don't know.
He's from Mississippi State. He'd have gotten fired if he said anything besides ice cream.
That's true.
They got the world's best ice cream over there. If you hadn't had it, it's so good.
And cheese.
Oh
yeah,
man, cheese is
absolutely.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you what.
I just hear the slang from my kids, froyo, frozen yogurt.
Right.
I got you.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, you did well.
Very good.
Did I pass?
I like how you leaned into it. You sat up and leaned into
He's
it.
ready.
It didn't take him long.
He's
Boom.
ready to play.
That was rapid fire answers too.
I like that Mississippi answer.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that was good. So, look, while we're here, we've got a question for both of y'all. Y'all can.
Thought you were going to escape, didn't
Y'all can, ask each other. And your lifeline is toxic. He's at the end of the table.
Lord.
The other guys know about this question. So what we're going to ask you a question. If you get it right, one of our listeners wins a prize. And Richie, would you tell us about what we're doing here?
All right. So we're playing for Poor Boy 23.
Oh, he left us a review.
Hey, man.
So he's got a chance to win. And what's he going to win?
And so he gets right out of Toxie's closet a Stanley thermos.
Oh,
Boom.
yeah.
Okay.
Probably shouldn't have said that with Toxie sitting in here today, but that's where we got this.
That's where I got this one.
That's where Laney got his.
All right, so you guys y'all can team up now. Don't just immediately blurt out. You got to think about this, okay? All right.
What was the first SEC school to wear a major camo company's camo on their uniform?
The first.
The first SEC school to wear a major camo company's camo on their uniform.
This is not to be confused with like the first team to win a national championship or anything like that, right?
Well, no, but this team did. No, well, I'm not going to say anything. So.
You're leading.
Yeah.
Leading the witness.
Bronson's
Just
a
saying,
bigger,
We're talking about the first. Who was the first that did this?
Could it? I mean, I would think it would be Mississippi State University.
Hey!
Well, that one slipped out.
Of course it was.
That was a lot of fun. You remember that, Toxie, when the base?
Yeah.
Of course you remember that. Throughout
Everybody, I thought you were saying football team, but obviously sports team.
the team. Yeah, team.
Yes.
First
Yeah.
SEC
Well, I
team.
didn't mean to confuse you down there, but
Oh, I was there.
Toxie threw out the pitch. That was an exciting day. That was 4 or 5 years ago.
No
Yeah.
longer than that.
Was
Coach
it?
It was
Cohen-
long then,
Coach
yeah.
Cohen was still there,
Okay.
and Mr. Fox was walking around on the field.
That's
so
right.
that's all-
Yeah.
or like
I have a
probably 10
hat
years
from
ago.
that night.
Yep, I do too.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
I have a jersey from that.
I
night.
remember worrying about you throwing that pitch, but you threw a strike.
I practiced for an hour.
And you threw it from the mound. You didn't scoot up like some people do. Look, I think we've learned. Lanley, what have you learned this week?
I could, every time the guys are in here, I learn more and more. So, and that's the fascinating thing about white-tailed deer to me. And being gamekeepers, you can never. It's never ending, so it's always giving back to you.
Bronson, have you got any kind of factoid like you did last time about the doe of twins and the 20,000 calories
That
a day?
was amazing. Yeah.
We're still talking about
20,000
that.
calories a day.
Golly, I'm not prepared this time, Bobby.
Yeah,
I didn't come with that in hand. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Dudley,
Steve,
did
you
you learn?
may have lectured today, though, and may have something from class that's right
I
on the
didn't, thank you.
Yeah.
Dudley, did you learn
You're on
anything
your own.
today?
I learned that deer eat velvet.
Other deer's velvet. I didn't
guess
realize that.
Suspected that, but didn't.
And Fawn's placenta. I never caught
Well,
up on that one either.
That was going to be my
Yeah.
new fact I had not heard of
Yeah.
before. Wow.
Sounds delicious.
And nutritious.
Hey, I've actually sampled a rumen and found the placenta in the doe's rumen before.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
That is heavy.
You'd really have to know what you were looking at there to tell what that was.
It's not something that just floats out real easy. So once it gets in there, it stays for a while. And this was during the hunting season. I was sampling rumens,
Wow.
and it was still in there.
Wow.
And you got poison ivy.
Oh yeah.
That reminds me of the movie Alien.
From the
Aliens.
rumen.
Yeah,
Wow. If you're allergic to
Oh,
it,
you
I
got
guess-
poison ivy from the room.
yeah, sampling and this was not during hunting season. This was during the summertime collections, and I was gloved up too. But I ended up, my forearms were just covered in it. I had to go to the hospital to get steroid shot.
Golly.
Yeah, because they're eating a lot of poison
Poison
ivy in
ivy.
the summertime, and
How about that? So, well, Dudley, have you got a Ask Dudley prepared for us?
I do.
Let's knock that out real quick.
So I was talking to Cody Kaysen and his son Kaysen on the phone, and they were just asking a lot of general questions about chestnuts, and it inspired me to talk about how to prepare chestnuts. We like to plant them or whatever for wildlife, but humans can eat them too. I sang a song about that in our Christmas
There's a
album.
very famous song about
about
that.
about a year
Your
ago.
Christmas album.
A beautiful rendition of chestnuts roasting over an open fire. But the prettiest sight to see is the holly that will be on your own front door.
But
I forgot he had a Christmas album.
real quickly, how to do this. You obviously collect your chestnuts, and then you want to go through them, make sure they feel dense, and they're, when you squeeze on them, it's hard, not hollow. And then you need to score them. So I got this off a YouTube video, and it works well. But just get you some of those fancy kitchen scissors, shears, like you would cut a chicken open with or something. And you stick the point in there, and then make a long cut lengthwise from.
So you actually want to go through the meat, just not
through the meat, just through the shell, from side to side, and you want a little more than half of the nut to be scored.
Right.
And then you soak them for 2, 3, 4 hours, and then you turn the oven on to 350.
Now help me out. Sorry about it. We're scoring it to get it out of the little prickly thing.
No, it's out of the prickly thing.
Okay,
it's out of the burr.
Then
You've got the nut.
Scoring the edge.
You make a slice more than halfway.
So the soaking can get in.
So the water can get in, and once you've processed it or cooked it, you can get the meat out more easily.
Do you brine it or just straight tap water?
Water. I've heard of folks using wine or things like that.
That's a little
port.
Sangria. Soak them in a bowl of water for a few hours, and then get your oven to 350 and put them on a sheet pan, scored side up.
Do you have parchment paper on that sheet pan?
You can if you want to. And you put them in there for 20 minutes or so. You can put a few ice cubes in there to provide a little bit more humidity, or spray some water on them a couple times during the process. And then turn the oven up to 400 to 450.
How long were we at 350?
You were at for 20 minutes.
Okay.
Then turn it up and do it for 10 to 15 minutes more. And then you take them out and you put them in like a Pyrex bowl that's lined with a moist cloth. And then you cover it with the moist cloth and let them sit there for another 10 or 15 minutes. And that helps loosen that outer shell even more.
So you get the meat out.
And then you while they're still warm, you take the meat out. And you can do all kinds of things. That may be another Ask Dudley. But you can eat them right there. Some people actually boil them, but this method worked well for me and had the most reviews.
Probably had better flavor than boiled too, I bet.
Yeah, it would kind of condense the
flavor.
flavor.
Kind of like steamed, whatever, shrimp or steamed vegetables have more flavor than boiled.
And we could talk to Michael Hunter about some of this, but you
hungry.
can make noodles, you can make stuffing, just like a traditional dressing. You can make flour, but what you don't eat on the spot, you can freeze them, like vacuum seal them and freeze them, and they last for a long time.
Wow.
Well, mine is actually fruiting in my yard, so I'm going to get some of those dudes off of there.
Yep. And people talk about making acorn flour, but this is a lot easier. They're a lot easier to process.
And you want to tell, I guess we can make the announcement that we're sorry we're out of chestnuts for the year.
Yes. Do you want to explain that?
Well, we grew a lot of very good chestnuts this year, and then somebody came in and bought them all. Yeah. So I guess that's the story to it. We're probably going to try to push out some pre-order stuff maybe to get on the list for next year. But the good news is we're ordering more seed than ever, so we'll have an even bigger and better crop next year.
That's right.
So sorry for the guys that weren't able to get some this year.
Dudley, it was like I was listening to Julia Childs over there give a recipe. We're so.
Thank you, Mr. Know-It-All.
All right, we got through that. So we look forward to the further explanation of how to eat those chestnuts at some point. I think we ought to leave them for the deer to eat myself.
Well,
that's just me.
Sure you can.
So, look, guys, we've really enjoyed having y'all. People need to go to the at Mississippi State Deer. What's that handle there? I'm gonna mess that up.
At MSU Deer Lab.
Yes.
Yeah.
MSU Deer Lab. Y'all got a lot of interesting stuff going on, and the guys can learn a lot listening and following y'all. So.
And for the older listeners like myself that don't know what the at means, MSUDeerLab.com, just a regular old website.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we like those too.
Yeah. And just search MSU Deer Lab, whatever social media platform.
And we always want to plug our podcast, Deer University.
Yeah, that's a good one. Listen to the one with Dr. Harry Jacobs from the other day. I enjoyed that. So that was good.
It's so awesome. I just got to say this because their life is about research of something they love. And we were talking about research. Actually, I was asked to speak about research importance in front of the big crowd at NWTF. And my analogy was like, it reminds me of that famous old saying that is so true. Is like, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. It's the same thing. If we don't know, if we can't quantify, if we can't learn, we're going to just take this whole thing in the ditch one day. And so you can't take your hat off enough and be too grateful for the job that they do. And actually, historically, talk about Dr. Jacobson. He was a pioneer nationally. Mm-hmm. But the emphasis from our whole school over there on it. I mean, you no matter what great university you are, you can't be tops in the nation, but in a few things, there's so many great schools. But we are in their department, and it's something I'm really proud of, having been an alumni.
No doubt about it. Me too.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yep. Stick your thumbs in suspenders, guys.
Go ahead and smile, Bronson.
There it is. That's a horn.
And this hadn't just started. It's about my dad.
I drove through the parking lot at Thompson yesterday, dropping some seed off at the seed lab to get tested.
Oh, good.
And, man, it just looks beautiful. Y'all have all those natives planted everywhere.
Oh, it's incredible.
Big old oak trees. There's mulch everywhere where you're not really mowing it. It's just it fits the bill.
Yeah.
Y'all are leading by example in many ways.
Wonderful place to work.
It sure is.
Well, good. Well, thank y'all so much for being here. We really appreciate y'all driving over. And Richie, so guys, with the Gamekeepers television show on Tuesday nights, have we got a new one coming up this Tuesday?
Yeah, our next episode lineup is our dove management episode, Sowing the Seeds of Success.
That's going to be a good one.
That is a good
So,
one.
yeah.
I like the sound of that.
I like those dove birds.
Yeah, so guys, catch the show on Tuesday nights, the Gamekeepers of Mossy Oak. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with your friends and leave us a review. You might win something out of Toxie's closet down there. And so I guess that's it. Anybody else got anything to add?
I'm just going to change the lock on my closet.
All right, say goodbye, Dudley.
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.